Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Cooking with Colbath. My name is Julie Colbath. I'm the coordinator of Civic Engagement in the Office of Student Life here at UM-Dearborn. Today we're going to be making some curried chickpeas with spinach, which I'm really excited to try this recipe. It looks super easy to do. It has some of the staples that we have in the pantry, and it is vegan and gluten-free. So we're going to be doing that, and while that's cooking, which the recipe says it should only be cooking for like 20 minutes, I need to make a new batch of cold brew and some simple sugar, or simple syrup, sorry. Simple syrup is just sugar and water, so we'll be doing that as well. So let me take you over to let me show you what we'll be using today. Alright, and just as a reminder, as this is premiering, there will be a live chat on the side. Feel free to comment, and I am on the other end and can comment back to you. That live chat after this has aired should still be there. You might have to do a little bit of clicks, but as always, there's the comment section, so feel free to throw things in the normal comment section below the video. Cool. So for the chickpeas, we'll be using, unsurprisingly, chickpeas. We're going to use 2 cans of them. We're going to use some olive oil, which I didn't grab down. We're going to be using an onion. We're going to be using some garlic. And like if you've watched any of these other episodes, I don't always have garlic on hand, but I like to have this minced garlic on hand because then it just saves me a little bit of work. The recipe calls for fresh ginger, and I think the last recipe called for ginger as well. Again, ginger is not something that I normally buy, so I just have ground ginger and we'll just substitute it out. It's nice when you have the spices on hand, and so 1 lets you like make things a lot easier, and then 2, you don't have to worry about trying to, right, this says 1 inch fresh ginger, like you don't always know what things are in the store, where to find them. We're going to use curry powder. So I saw a lot of recipes with like garam masala and other spices that might not be as common in your household. I know, right, if I don't have some of the other more traditional Indian spices, I normally have curry powder. So curry powder and ginger are like the main spices that we'll be using today. And then we're going to be using, and I must have put the large bin back in the fridge, we're going to be using some spinach. It says you can use fresh or frozen. I normally have fresh on hand, but frozen's super convenient. I use frozen in like spinach and artichoke dips and stuff like that. You can also freeze spinach if it's going bad. Or I feel like you could use canned. I feel like once it cooks down, it doesn't really matter. And I think we do have some canned spinach in the pantry as well. Then we'll be using a can of tomato sauce. And we already did our chickpeas, so that's great. For our cold brew coffee, we'll just be using coffee, beans, or ground coffee. And we will be using water. So I know people probably don't have jars that big, but I'll show you some of the smaller jars that I normally use. And then for the simple sugar, or simple syrup, I don't know why I keep calling it simple sugar, we're just using a cup of water and a cup of sugar. So my sugar is like right now it's a mix of like the turbinado raw sugar and cane sugar, so yours probably looks all white. Mine just has a little bit of a brown crystallizations in there. Cool. Let's move you over. So the first thing that we're going to do is, woo, crazy. We're going to cut our onion. So I'm going to grab a knife. And I'm going to rinse this off. And then I'm going to move you over. Like we've talked about before, let me just make sure you can see. It's a good idea. Sorry, like sometimes I'm trying to position myself in front of the camera so that the sound you can actually hear. It bothers me when I like watch these back sometimes and there are pockets of time where you can't hear me. So I'm very sorry about that. I try. So like I was saying, you'll always want to wash your produce, again, regardless of if it's organic or conventional. People have touched it in the store, people have touched it when it's traveling, even right if you're buying it from a local farmer's market, there's some transportation and some touching, so it's just a good idea to rinse it off. All right, cool. And then this bowl is just my compost bowl. It has my coffee grounds from this morning. If you know of any cool things to do with coffee grounds, let me know. I tried to save them for a while because I think it's good in the garden. I know you can make like different scrubs and different soaps and stuff. I just haven't gotten to that yet. All right, so we're going to take our onion, and like we've done in the past, we're going to just cut off the top. And again, you could save this if you wanted to make stock. We're going to cut off the bottom so we create a flat edge. Cut it in half. We're going to peel it. So you could save the skins on the top and bottom. And you can normally, I'll just like stick them in a Ziploc bag, some of my vegetable scraps, and stick them in the freezer. And then you're able to make a vegetable stock on your own. Ooh, it's starting to hit. This is a potent onion. So if you have tips or tricks on how to not cry, let me know. I know contacts normally help, and I'm running low on mine, so I've not been wearing them. All right, so we're just going to dice this onion sort of like we've been doing, right, where we make cuts one way and then make cuts 90 degrees the other way. We'll do that on both sides. To go. So we're gonna saute the onions. Sorry, now I'm like teary-eyed, not crying for any particular reason. I'm gonna grab the garlic and the ginger. I need to grab a measuring spoon. So for the garlic, it calls for 2 cloves. I normally do 1 teaspoon of the minced garlic per clove. So I have a half a teaspoon, so we'll add that. And so just got some generic olive oil. You can measure it out. It calls for 2 tablespoons. I'm gonna turn my pan on, and then I normally just drizzle it in. You can measure if you'd like. You could also use like vegetable oil, canola oil, avocado oil. Oils can be, unless you're baking, I feel like oils can be relatively interchangeable when you're cooking. Some of the rest, like some, more like Asian styled recipes have sesame oil because it has like a nice nutty flavor. So I'm just gonna swirl my oil around in my pan so it fully coats the bottom. We'll let that heat up for a second and we'll look at the directions. So we dice the onion, we have the minced garlic already done, and just to grate the ginger. I forgot to grab it, so I'm going to grab it and grab a measuring spoon. So if you did have fresh ginger, it would be pretty easy. The way to get the skin off is you normally can take a spoon and sort of like get it under the skin to get it to peel off. And then you can grate it against either like a small cheese grater or any sort of grater, right? We're going to add in the onion now. Sorry, still sniffling, trying to get over this onion. I don't think we'll need this cutting board anymore, so I'm going to throw it in the sink. Cool, so our onions in the pan. We are going to add, so this is a half teaspoon, so I'm going to add 4, so we get 2 teaspoons since we need 2 cloves of garlic. Getting pretty low on the garlic. You could also, if you don't have fresh or this minced garlic already minced, you could easily substitute it for granulated garlic, right? I feel like the core spices in my world are salt, pepper, and garlic. So I normally always have garlic on hand. And again, it's one of those spices that you can get relatively cheap, and also you can get it at the dollar store. This is a 1/4 teaspoon, so it calls for 1 inch fresh ginger. So when I was doing some Google searching earlier, that normally equates to about a tablespoon of grated ginger, and a 1/4 teaspoon is supposed to be equivalent to 1 tablespoon of fresh ginger. So, right, the like dried and spiced forms are normally a little bit more potent, so you don't always want to assume that it's a 1-to-1. Not normally. It's normally like, right, like a 1/4 teaspoon to a tablespoon, right? Like there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. So, right, like that's a fraction of it. Let me grab a spoon. So I don't know if you can hear it, but it's sizzling. So I'm going to stir it around. And so we're going to do this. It says the onions need to soften, so 3 to 5 minutes. Again, I've never tried this recipe. I'm excited to try it. It's been a while since I've had any Indian food. Moving to a new area, trying to find like the restaurants that I really like. And so I went to one in Dearborn on Michigan Ave. If you have any suggestions of other Indian restaurants, throw them in the chat. I would love to know them. Again, this says 3 to 5 minutes, but it's like cooking is so dependent on your heat source and the type of pan that you're using. So if it happens faster, cool. If it happens slower, like just have a little bit of patience. All right, let me read. Let's see what the next step is. Add the curry powder and continue to saute the onion mixture for 1 minute. Do y'all have any cool recipes? I feel like I ask all the time. Any cool recipes that you've been trying in quarantine? Throw them in the chat. Throw them in the comments. I've been trying to, do some meal planning. Have some different recipes already on hand. I feel like sometimes I get so overwhelmed at the end of the day when I just want to eat something, and the fact that I would have to think about, look for a recipe, I don't love it. So I've been making a meal plan. Yesterday I tried some, I don't eat a lot of meat. Yesterday I tried some barbecue tofu sliders. They're okay. Sometimes recipes don't always turn out as good as we want them to. All right, I'm going to grab the curry powder, and we're going to add that. So I already measured it out. This is 1.5 tablespoons. So I'm going to sprinkle it on. We're going to stir it around and cook the onions for another minute. Woo, such a nice smell. The onion is starting to waft into my eyes again, so if I start crying, I'm sincerely sorry. All right, so something I noticed, you always want to read through your recipes before you actually start cooking. That's a mistake I make all the time, is to not do that. It's not a good idea, because there are steps, that sometimes you'll be like, oh, this seems like it should be in chronological order. It's not always, right? So The recipe list doesn't say like a quarter cup of water, and not that it's hard to get a quarter cup of water, but like it says to add a quarter cup of water to the skillet. So we're gonna do that. And it also says to add the spinach. So I know this looks like a lot. If you've cooked with spinach before, you know that. And you've probably seen the memes before too. This feels like a forest of spinach, and by the time it cooks down, it's like one tree. So it's nice to have spinach on hand. Let me show you the container that I normally buy. I normally buy a big container like this. So, I mean, it's a pound of spinach. So we're going to saute this until it's wilted. So I like having spinach on hand, right? You can do a lot of things with it. You could add it, like if you make scrambled eggs in the morning or omelets, you could add it to that. You can also add it to smoothies. If you're into like green smoothies, right? Spinach or kale is a really good way to get some like extra fiber and some extra nutrients. Can't talk today for some reason. And so sometimes I'll like add it to my pastas and stuff, right? Like it's a good way to get some greens in your diet. So sorry, I know the glare of the light. I've tried to like play around with it and open the blinds, but that just makes it worse. So I'm going to show you how it's starting to wilt. Right, so it still has a little bit of time to go. So let's see. I'm just reading the directions. It says the water will help steam and wilt the spinach. No water needed if using frozen spinach. So that's another way that it's good to read the recipe, right? Like if you're using frozen spinach, it probably already has a little bit of water in it, right, from being frozen and then it thawing. And so you wouldn't need to add water. And I think if you're using canned, I'll just drain it and then just throw it in. You probably also don't need to use water because it's probably in some sort of liquid as like the preservative. All right, cool. This is super wilted, which is exactly what we wanted. So let me show you. It looks great. All right, now we're going to add the tomato sauce. I'm going to turn my heat down just a little bit. So it's nice sometimes if you get the cans that pop, so you don't have to use your can opener. If you don't have a can opener, and I don't have any tricks for you, but if you don't have a can opener and you do want stuff from the pantry, please make a note of it so we try to give you the cans that have the pop top lids on them. All right, and then we're going to, let me move you over a little bit. So we're going to drain and rinse our chickpeas. So like I said, we're using 2 cans. And hopefully you can hear me. I know it's a weird angle for the camera. A good reason to drain and rinse your canned beans is to help get some of that excess salt off. That, you know, the salt is needed for like the preservation of them and the canning of them, but you don't need a bunch of extra salt in your diet. So we drained them into our colander and now we're just going to rinse them. Try to get some of the excess liquid off. I'm going to scoot you back. Alright, now we're just going to throw these in here. Now we're going to mix it together. And my heat was still pretty high, so I turned it down again. We're just going to mix this until it like is evenly distributed, the sauce and the spinach and the chickpeas. If you didn't know, chickpeas also are called garbanzo beans, so if you're looking for them in the store, they do have two names, but they are the same thing. All right. So when you're done with this, right, I think basically this just needs to heat through, so we're almost done. You can serve it over rice, so I made a lot of rice the other day, and so part of the strategy for what I was making this week is what can I use to utilize my rice. So you could do that, or you could make some naan or buy some naan. So if you're not familiar, naan is like an Indian flatbread. I've made it before, so if you're into I feel like, I don't know if it's still a craze, right? People were making bread in quarantine a lot. So you'll just need some yeast. There's probably recipes without yeast. I've only used one recipe before, which is pretty easy. You just have to have the time to wait for it to rise, right? So this is mixed. I'm going to show you. And we are just going to heat it through. 5 minutes. I'm going to turn the timer on. All right. So next, we're going to work on our simple syrup. Got it right that time. So I'm going to grab my sugar and my water. So simple syrup is just equal parts water and sugar. So this is 1 cup of water, 1 cup of sugar. I'm going to add it to my small saucepan over here. And then I'm just going to turn it on. All right. Spoon. So basically with simple syrup, geez, you're just dissolving the sugar in the water to make a syrup, right? Like syrups normally don't have like granulated anything in them, you know, they're just like a smooth substance. So the reason that I'm doing this, right, is I like to drink cold brew coffee. I don't know why exactly. I feel like it is a little bit, the way that it's brewed makes the coffee a little bit less bitter. And so I didn't like coffee. I didn't drink coffee probably until like 4 years ago. And so I started drinking like cold brew, right, because it didn't have as much of the bitterness to it. So that's just, you know, and I don't want to add sugar crystals to my coffee, and then again there's like, you know, these granules of sugar. So what I normally do is make simple syrup so that I'm able to still get like a little bit of that sweetness. So you can add it into your cold brew coffee in a similar way that you would add sugar to your hot brewed coffee. So basically we're just going to let this get to like a boiling point. You want to make sure that you're mixing it so that the sugar doesn't stick to the pan. But we'll just let the mixture heat up and boil a little bit until the sugar is dissolved, and then we'll just turn it off. You could also use this, right, if you drink like iced tea or something, or, you know, there's lots of ways that you can use simple syrup. And I've never tried to make like my own coffee syrups. I think that would be a cool thing, right? Because I had bought a bottle at the store and didn't realize it was going to be like this big and like $4, right? And so maybe another time we can try to make our own coffee syrups. This is boiling pretty hard, so I'm just going to stir it around. All right. Has 2 minutes left. I mean, again, this step is basically just like for heating it through, not for necessarily cooking anything, right? Everything's already like ready to eat. So you could just serve that again over rice or with naan. We're gonna make our cold brew while we're waiting for that. Move this. Okay, cool. So I got these jars a couple weeks ago and I was stoked. I don't know exactly what else I'm going to do with these because they came in a 6-pack, but I think it'd be good, right? Like sometimes I have like huge bags of rice and, being able to store that in like a more condensed container. And I also like the main purpose of me buying it so that I could make more cold brew at one time, right? Because you can also use these. This is what I've been using for years. I mean, really, you can use any sort of container that you can close. So feel free to use these if you have. These are just like the 4-cup ball jars. If you have those, or if you just have like a large Tupperware container, you can use anything. So this is 6 cups of water. And then it fluctuates if I have ground. So this timer is going to go off. So I'm going to turn it off. And I'm turning this off. And it's done. I'm going to grab my spoon for my simple syrup so I can stir that while I'm talking to you. So it's starting to already get pretty hot. If you are using just like regular cane sugar, it will be like a clear liquid. When you're using like raw sugar, and again, you don't want to use, you could try to use brown sugar actually, it might add like a nice flavor. You might have to check though if it's still like a 1-to-1 ratio. Brown sugar is like a little bit different, so you might want to see if it's a different ratio. But if you use raw sugar, it's going to be like it'll still be clear, but it won't be it won't look like water sort of, right? It'll have like a little bit of a brown tint just because the sugar is brown. So that's getting close. 6 cups of water. So sometimes I have beans. So this is whole coffee beans. Cool. Sometimes I have ground coffee. So I have whole coffee beans. So I put them in my coffee grinder. So let me just show you. This is my coffee grinder. It's nothing fancy. I think it was like $10 on Amazon. So with that, you're able, right, to grind your own beans. So with cold brew, it's good to like have a coarser grind. But I've made it with like, for a long time, I didn't have a grinder. And so sometimes I would like put my coffee beans in a bag and roll them with a rolling pin. I mean, it works, but it takes a while. So that's already done, right? Like that only took a couple minutes. I'll let it cool for a second while we're doing this, and then I'll pour it into a jar so you can see it. But I didn't have a coffee grinder for a long time, so I just used ground coffee. And as long as you have some sort of straining method that has, either a filter in it to get the like finer particles to not slip through, doesn't matter. So if you're using beans, I've found that the ratio of like 3 cups of water to 3/4 cup of whole beans is what I use. If you're using ground beans, I normally use 3 cups of water to 2/3 cup of ground beans. So I'm just going to grab a measuring cup. Not that it matters. So I already did. So this is 1.5 cups of whole beans, and I ground them in my coffee grinder. And then you're just going to add them into your jar of water. One cool thing that I wanted to tell y'all, which is not food related, as I'm sure most of you know, there is an election coming up in November. So last Tuesday, it just happened, right, that we didn't have Cooking with Colbath. And if you live in Michigan, you probably know that the Michigan State primary happened last Tuesday. So I decided to volunteer at the polls. And it was I was a little bit nervous, right? Like, I'm not going to lie, it's a long day. You have to be there. If you're working at the polls, like at a polling location, you have to get there at 6 a.m., right? Because the polls open at 7. You have to help set up. And then you leave around 9-ish because the polls close at 8, 9 p.m. But it was a super cool experience, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who, feels like they are able and isn't, they do provide you with like PPE and everything. I'm gonna grab a spoon. Right, they do provide you with PPE, and like they are doing sanitization, right? So they're really trying to, make sure it's a safe environment. So we're just stirring this so that the beans go into the water. But anyway, the poll was super cool. I think it's a good way to kind of like learn about the process. You don't need to have any knowledge to work there, right? So I definitely recommend it if you are interested in the November election. You do get paid. It probably, worked out to a little over $10 an hour. So I definitely would recommend doing it if you're interested. I think it's a really cool way to get involved and to understand the election process a little bit better. Great. So this is mixed. I'm just going to scoot some of the beans off of here. And then what I'll do, I'm just going to put a lid on it. So again, you could just, it's not my day today, y'all. You could do this with any sort of container that you're able to close. So I'm just going to put this in the fridge. And I think generally they say like at least 12 hours or overnight. So that could be right like anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. I think it can sit for up to like 24, just kind of depends on your preference of strength. So I'm just going to put it in the fridge, and then tomorrow I will strain it. And let me show you what I normally use. So if you have a traditional coffee pot, you can definitely do that, like use that, right? Like you could put a filter in there and then just pour it in as, like when the coffee machine is normally going, it pulls up the water from the back and pours it through. You can just pour, the cold brew through that and then it'll strain it. I had a coffee pot, and then I don't always love a coffee pot if it's just me drinking coffee in the morning. And I like to do the cold brew, right? So I have one of these. I think this is like a pour over or a drip. This is a drip, I think. I'm not a coffee aficionado, so please forgive me. So normally I'll just pour it in here, and then it'll strain it out. I like these, right, because it has less waste than the coffee filters, but sometimes I'll still put a coffee filter in there, right, just to make sure that I'm not getting beans slipping through, because I don't want that texture in my coffee. You could also, and these are all things that I like for some reason felt I needed for quarantine. You could also do this in a French press, especially if it's right just you, and you didn't want to make such large quantities of cold brew. You could easily just put your beans and your water in a French press machine and then just leave it similarly, for like at least 8 to 12 hours. And then with the French press, you add the beans and the water, and then you can just push this down and it separates it by this. Sorry, it's a little bit dirty from my coffee this morning. It just, goes through the filter, so then your beans stay on the bottom, and then you're able to pour out the liquid. All right, cool. This might be a little bit too small, but you'll at least be able to see what I mean. So I'm going to pour, oh boy, I think a towel fell. So again, make sure you watch that. Obviously it's already done, but like make sure you watch it to make sure it's not burning. It can turn really fast. There are times where I'm like, oh, I just need to make simple syrup quick, and I like throw it on and then forget that I did it, and then it burns, and that's no fun. So I'm just going to pour it into this glass container. And I'll bring it over. So you can see that like this sort of looks like apple juice or like broth, but this is simple syrup, so it's hard to write. Like you can see through it. It's now all like liquid, so the sugar has dissolved into the water. So when I add it to my cold brew, I don't get any graininess. So it's a super easy way, you know, to have a sweetener. You could also, in your cold brew, if you wanted, you could use honey. Sometimes that's a little bit thicker too, so it can be a little bit harder to dissolve. Or you could use syrup, or you could use agave, right? There are lots of options. But that's all I have for y'all today. Thank you so much for joining, whether it's during the premiere or watching it afterwards. Feel free to throw any comments in the chat, or if you're watching this live, again, in the like live chat option. If you try this, let me know. I'm excited to try it. Maybe I'll comment on how it is when this is premiering. So I'm just planning to serve it over some rice. So again, if you have any suggestions on things that we should be making, please feel free to let me know. We get notifications if you comment after the fact, or you can message us on Facebook or Instagram, or our Twitter is back up, which is super exciting. Feel free to check out the other cool things on this channel. UM-Dearborn is doing a lot of cool things to, you know, I know the virtual world can be a little bit scary and it's not always the best, but we're, you know, trying to have some engaging programming and some cool things going on to, you know, still build that sense of community. So again, thanks y'all for joining, and we'll see you next time.